welcome back to Dev Show. This is our very last episode before we go on the summer break. My name is Sherry List, and I am here, your host today, together with my good colleague Rasmus Jag. Hi Rasmus, how are you doing?
Hi Sherry, I'm good. Thanks for that. I'm still here in my basement trying to not get too hot. It's pretty hot outside today in Denmark. So how are you?
I'm also fine. I am counting down to start my summer vacation next week.
Ooh.
Yes.
Nice.
So for today, we have a super interesting topic to discuss. But before I handing it over to Rasmus to talk about the agenda for today, I want to mention that we really want you all to interact with each other and ask your question from the speaker. Especially the speaker today, he specifically asked that he wants to hear all of your questions during the session. So as soon as you type it in the chat, doesn't matter if you're watching us from YouTube, Facebook, or Learn TV, just put your question in the chat. We are going to highlight it for the speaker and he's going to answer your question. But we really want you to familiarize yourself with our code of conduct, which is highlighted here. And in short, we want you to be mindful and respectful of each other. And as usual, we're also going to ask our speaker to choose one of the questions, and then that person is going to receive a swag box. So just saying. And you're also going to get a link to claim your Azure Heroes badges. We are going to highlight it during the session and also at the end of the session. But as we promise you from long time, that you can somehow exchange these badges with a swag box as well. And today is the day. We are going to highlight a link to a form where if you have collected so far 15 of this learner badger that we distributed through the whole live show, you can also get a special swag box. So stay tuned and look for the URLs that we are highlighting for you. And back to you, Rasmus.
So that's when I regret that I haven't collected all the learner badges from our 38 something episodes, where I could actually get 2 swag boxes for that, right?
Exactly. You lost your chance.
But stay tuned. We will have even more episodes after the summer holidays, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly. The show continues after summer. So
yeah. Amazing. But yeah, today we will have a very important topic in the cloud space. We will have a session called FinOps for developers. So, and in my role, working for Microsoft as a cloud solution architect, I know that this is an important area, not just to deploy a lot of things into to the cloud, but also to be able to control cost, but also be able to actually optimize afterwards. So I look forward to hear the session today. So from he said that we're going to learn what FinOps is and what does it mean, what does Azure offer in this space, and also how to cost optimize and how to measure success. So very important areas to learn about. And to teach us about that, we have from Maersk, also working with him, we have Tamas. So welcome, Tamas, to Dev Show. Pleasure to have you here. How are you?
Hi, Sherry. Hi, Rasmus. Thank you. All good. How about yourself?
Yeah, all good.
Fine.
Thanks.
And I'm personally very excited to actually listen to this session, because normally we hear a lot about cost optimization and FinOps, but it is not being directed to the developers. So I am going to listen very carefully to learn from you today.
Yeah,
so Tamas, sorry.
That. Yep. No worries. let's try to. Yeah, definitely we will try to do that one. Obviously, FinOps is a kind of a broader subject, but definitely there are elements which are important for engineers and developers alike. So yep.
And speaking about engineers, you have been an IT engineer for plus 20 years. And when I look at your resume, I see a lot of ops. So SecOps and now FinOps. I don't know if you also taught DevOps. So can you just in 20 seconds talk about your experience the past 20 years?
Definitely. So my main background is, as you mentioned, it's like more operational background in IT infrastructure and specific focus on security. And as such, I will be honest, one reason why I jumped on the boat of FinOps, because they are very much alike, to be honest. What we're doing in in FinOps, or what we're trying to achieve is, it has a lot of resonance and same issues in a certain way as security or SecOps, because SecOps is also usually security is a second thought in quite often. Same thing with finance. So yeah, we'll talk about that in the coming hour, hopefully as well, a bit more.
Fantastic, thanks.
Great. And then, as we discussed before just coming here on the stage, we discussed that you moved a little bit around. You lived in Finland, now you live in London. Maybe you can tell us a little bit that why London?
Well, why London? In that sense, I'm not saying I'm a native English speaker. I'm not. It is my second language. But definitely it was an easy choice compared to Finnish. Even it is, according to linguists, it is a mother tongue of Hungarian, which is my mother language. It was challenging to learn, to be honest, Finnish. I still have few words which in the memory, but definitely it was easier to focus on English and getting to a broader market and getting maybe different opportunities than what you can get in Finland. But I miss Finland and the nature, and well, definitely I miss my sauna.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. As a person that not a native speaker and living in a country, and I don't know the native language very well, I totally understand what you mean. But it's always good to travel and discover new words and live in the new places. I really love that experience. So
but Danish is super easy language, right, Sherry? So
what?
Danish is a super easy language.
Yeah. And that's the only thing I know.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, okay, that's great. So maybe we can start. We are going to get the screen ready for you to share your screen. So.
Okay, so I mean, let's start with that. So welcome everyone on this dev show today. I'm sharing my screen in a moment. Hopefully that will work out just as fine. Okay, good. And hopefully you can see it as well in full screen. Cool. So FinOps on Azure, and we discussed this with Rasmus before. We are working actually quite closely with Rasmus on this subject, because the company I'm working for at the moment, Maersk, is actually heavily on Azure. We built a lot of experience in the last, I will be honest, 12 months on FinOps, as we built our practice internally within the organization. And it is a journey. It's like, if you look on it, we have all these ops now out there. As I mentioned before, there is, or for everybody aware of it, there are SecOps, DevOps, DevSecOps, whatnot. Lots of all these ops are popping up these days. FinOps is the most recent one. But the logic is fairly similar. So FinOps is actually getting people together, working together, which they were working before in isolation. And in this case, actually getting finance closer to IT to understand how IT operates, and getting finance closer to engineering and understanding how cloud operates. And that's, at least from my understanding, that's where we are trying to get to. Obviously, there is a definition of FinOps, which is usually translated as cloud financial operations or cloud financial management. I put it in here, the exact quotation from the FinOps Foundation. So there is a foundation which was recently, well, not that recently, in the last, I think, over a year, it was established, and it is now part of the Linux Foundation. as an organization and a non-profit organization which is driving discussions around FinOps and developing courses and driving the community together for to get better maturity in the space based on the feedback and the work from the community members. I put the link, and I put there in that honestly, in 1 hour, it is a bit of challenge to tell you everything about FinOps. So the idea here, at least my idea was today, to talk about how you can implement these things or how you can take some of these practices from the FinOps into reality on Azure, and how you can get going at least first, and what are the opportunities to execute on Azure. But I put in there that there is an introduction course which is free from the FinOps Foundation. Actually, this is what they developed. Obviously, they have lots of other courses. You can go to a, I think, 3-day course on FinOps and whatnot, and you can do certifications. But just as an engineer, maybe you can spend some time to just review this free course, for example, and understand at least the basics of it. That what FinOps is about. And I would call out that FinOps is not about cost saving. So there is a bit of misconception there. I think that when finance obviously comes in, finance definitely has a driver to drive down costs. But FinOps itself is trying to find the balance between, I put this there, this triangle, trying to find the balance between business, finance, and engineering, and finding the sweet spot there so that actually you can deliver a service which is valuable, and it is also kind of, you're not overspending something, so you're not generating actually waste, or you're achieving your business goals as a company. On one last thing which I wanted to call out in the first slide, and again, I mean, feel free to go into the FinOps.org. There are lots of good materials there. They have lots of frameworks, KPI ideas, whatnot. But one thing why I think is important to have sessions like this is there is this state of FinOps report, and I'll just open up my browser in a moment, which talks about, it was taken earlier this year, and then kind of based on the community in the FinOps community, and that state of FinOps report, which is generated recently. One thing which was called out, and I just switching to my DAC. And as I said, you can find it on data.finops.org, this one. What are the biggest challenges of FinOps teams face? And again, FinOps teams, they're talking about the biggest challenge, getting engineers to take action. And there are lots of other things. And again, you can have a review on this report. This is a publicly available report. I think there are lots of interesting things you can find out about. Usually these are big organizations who were giving feedback on this one. But one reason is to get to have these discussions, because I think, honestly, from my point, I have an engineering background. I'm not as a pure-born developer as such, but in this context, engineers, developers are actually kind of like. This is probably kind of would apply to them. That it seems the FinOps team seems as a challenge that engineers take action, which is as more like a problem statement. It's not something that it's a blame on the engineering teams on any means. So don't get me wrong on that. But just wanted to call out that this is an experience which the FinOps team see there. From my point, how I interpret this one, that usually financial or cost optimization related activities are not prioritized in those teams as a feature request. So it's more like a problem there, that similar thing like with security or SecOps, that security as such usually is not involved from day one and not embedded into the culture from day one. Same problem we can see with engineering teams from the financial perspective, or from cost awareness perspective, that it is good that actually a project which is starting on cloud, they also consider the cost elements of that project. And if they include that element in the thinking, and as you drive forward your discussion into design, and then going into development, and then go into production, being on a certain level cost aware, so that you actually know how much you're spending on cloud, and is that mapping to your business needs, that can help you to get better in basically doing FinOps instead of doing a one-time big bang activity, which usually doesn't last too long. If you embed these features, like SecOps, same thing with FinOps, practicalities into the day-to-day, can kind of help you to get better in being more optimized in that space. So this is briefly, honestly, what is FinOps? It's cloud financial management. That includes forecasting, budgeting, all that kind of things, which is probably not something which engineers are that much interested in. And I completely understand that one. However, understanding the individual cost elements you are implementing on your cloud and the reasons of taking certain decisions and those cost implications, it is important to understand, because that will, in the end of the day, affect that. Is your solution for the business, or is it just for yourself? You are picking Kubernetes because you would like to work on containers, or actually container is the best solution for your business? I think that's an important discussion which should be had, and also as part of any design. But I'll get to that one in actually moving on the cloud and what Azure provides in that space for you to kind of consider cost elements as you go ahead. But so with that, moving into really basics of FinOps fundamentals, and I just highlight here the key elements which I think are important as FinOps. And as I mentioned, please go ahead and do the either free courses or the paid courses if you're really interested in these in details. But FinOps is circling around these things. So first of all, FinOps is as again, I would call out all the other ops. It's around people, process, and technology. And if you ask me, technology is the least important part here. People and processes are. So again, empowering people to be able to make decisions, and being ready to be there, the processes that actually they can execute those decisions, and elevate people to be able to make those decisions so that they actually know what is the best solution, for example, to pick, instead of always going with virtual machine, because that's our skill level, instead of upskilling those people and having them either, for example, taking a track on containerization or different past resources in a cloud provider. You can actually achieve quite good cost savings through these technologies, and empowering them with being self-service capable and being able to get all the information. That's the key element also of FinOps as well. Trying to distribute the responsibility among all the participants, because in this case, engineers, when they provision resource, they actually do purchase. They should understand the effects of that one to the company as well in a certain way. But with said that, obviously technology is a key element here. The different cloud providers, they provide different solutions, and Azure also provides their cloud native solutions on that. We will go through in that. However, as always, there are third-party solutions out there. Again, that is something to consider as part of a company's cloud strategy or a team cloud strategy, that what are the best tools to be used, because just because something is best on the market maybe doesn't fit for the organization because they are looking for something else. But that's kind of briefly about that one. And defining those roles. So when, sorry, just stepping back one. So when I'm saying people and processes, defining actually roles and responsibility is a key element also of FinOps, so that everybody knows what they are accountable for, making sure that the costs are mapped to those who are actually consuming those resources is one key element of FinOps, so that we know actually if something is there, and then we make them being capable to being self-sufficient, so that whatever we can, and that's where on the bottom there is the automation at heart, whatever they need information, they can get it automated by themselves, so self-service wherever possible. In FinOps, there are different maturity levels. I just put it in here just that you kind of see these words, but honestly, from an engineering perspective, it's might not be that relevant, but there are 3 levels of the cycle depending on different capabilities, and that's called crawl, walk, and run. And obviously, crawl is when people are start to kind of understand what they should do in that space. So, for example, a simple thing that you are pulling down your monthly invoices from Azure, and you're reviewing them on a monthly basis. That is, for example, a crawl stage, walk stage. For example, you build out also practice that you review those invoices and take actions on those on a more regular cadence, for example, a weekly base, or even building a capability that at least certain people can go in and review those costs pretty much anytime. And that can mean even Azure portal. And run could mean that you build an internal financial cost reporting solution, which is breaking down the cost to all the teams and surfacing the cost relevant to those teams and the consumption to those teams, so they can actually look into that, how much they spend, pretty much up to date, as fast as possible. Obviously, there could be some delays from the different cloud providers and from Azure as well. So it could take 24, 48 hours to, for example, get that data, but that would be kind of the run, that almost up-to-date information on the consumption and the facts of certain actions. And that is an example on a maturity cycle. On the action loop, another key element of the FinOps foundation is inform, optimize, and operate. And I was trying to break down the DAC also and the different offerings from Azure based on this. I think most of them tells what they are. Inform is basically reporting how much you spend in the last 1 month. What is the cost of a certain resource you spend up? How your cost look like? What is your cost trend, for example, as you move forward? Optimize then is finding ways how you can optimize your cloud spend. Because one thing that you have a visibility first, but then finding ways to optimize cloud spend, it can be a challenge. And then operate is actually execute those optimizations, and maybe even building some automatic resolutions, either by automatically eliminating VMs, or just not even allowing to deploy VMs or certain virtual machines, or right-sizing automatically, or shutting down certain machines. So there are lots of ways, and we will drive into that one, what exactly that means. But these are the key kind of action loops which the FinOps is calling out. And then last and not least, and this is, some people call it the FinOps Nirvana, is driving the discussion based on KPIs and unit metrics, instead of talking on can you optimize this virtual machine, which I don't think any engineer or developer would find interesting, right? Or please right-size your app service environment. Please scale it down because you're spending too much and it's not utilized. That may be not the most exciting thing or challenge for any developer or for any engineer. However, if together with the product owner or with the business owner of the certain business solution, defining certain KPIs and driving the discussion and the optimization scale of the environment might be more beneficial, and also more interesting for the teams, how they can drive down those KPIs. A good example which I can think of is, for example, you're receiving your KPI is based on the amount of web requests or purchases through your web shop, and driving down example, you're receiving 10,000 of those requests in a month, and your cost is 1,000, then your KPI or unit metric is 1. Idea would be that actually you drive that cost down. And that's an engineering challenge, how you can actually drive that cost down. What are the decisions you would make? And hopefully that is more actually challenging and interesting for engineers as well, and developers, to thinking on ideas, instead of, again, right-sizing a certain virtual machine. In my opinion, I think that's a better approach, and that is also recommended by FinOps. But it is a challenging discussion to finding those KPIs and unit metrics. Can be a long discussion between engineering, between the business, and also with finance as well. But that's what people are calling as a FinOps Nirvana. And I will be honest, that is a challenging discussion at Maersk as well. Last but not least, as all the ops out there, especially when we are talking about cloud, automation is the key and at the heart of all this. So reaching to a certain maturity level, and focusing on the real elements which are really important to you for the organization. Automating as many things as you can is the best way forward, because then you can continue discussing with your engineering managers, with the business, what are the key important things for them, discussing KPIs, what are the best KPIs, for example, instead of focusing on right-sizing one VM, which I keep coming back to, or right-sizing an app service environment, shutting down something for a weekend, which is not needed for the weekend, something which is just needed for example, for a dev environment on a normal working day. So these are the key things which I think FinOps is circling around, and obviously these can be go into detail. If you go to a course or something like that, then you can learn more things about this. And with that, cool. So, and with that, jumping into Azure and where to start on Azure, and how you can do FinOps on Azure. Before somebody gets to Azure, and in general in the cloud, the benefits of cloud is that you are paying for what you're using, what you're consuming. So it is a pay-as-you-go environment, and it is supporting. It is flexible. So you can ramp down something when you're not needed. You can even shut it down. You can delete those resources. And when you need the resources, you can scale out, scale up. Basically, it's elastic. You should, that is something that as part of an architecture design should be part of as move forward, and utilizing these capabilities of the cloud, understanding obviously the business demand and the business need of a certain solution is very important. And as I called out here, the Azure Well-Architected Framework, it has, if I recall, 5 pillars. One of them is the cost optimization. And I think all the other well-architected frameworks, also one element is cost optimization in each one of them as the key element. So that has to be considered during the design of any solution on a public cloud environment as move forward. It doesn't have to be the only decision point. It has to be one of them, obviously. So just optimizing just the sake of optimize, but then ruining your business because your web shop is not available, that's not the way forward. But finding the best solution, which is matching with what the business wants to achieve, is very important. To do that one, very simple things out there from Microsoft. One of them is cost calculator, and I was thinking on to quickly show that one as one tool has to be used. So I'll show that one in a moment. How it looks, what it does. You can basically put together a solution as you like. It is fairly manual, and I forgot to actually open it up here, but Google is our friend. Or Bing, actually, in this case. So probably most of you have used this already, and in that sense, I would say it's not a rocket science as per se. And it is using the public prices of Microsoft, but it is a good start to understand your costs as well. Few elements which I would call here out in general as a decision points when somebody's making those. Region. Now I'll show in a moment, actually, there's a comparison site which is comparing the virtual machine prices. It is a third party. So depending on the region, your cost can be very different. Understanding the business need, is your solution actually has to be in West Europe, one of the most expensive region actually of Azure. So considering picking something else like North Europe, or even maybe hosting it in US, could be a driver behind driving down the costs. But obviously, if it doesn't match your business needs because all your customers are in Europe and you would like to have a responsive solution, yeah, maybe don't put it into US. But having a look into that, maybe there is a solution not just in West Europe as a default one, could be a reasonable thing to do. Then a few other elements here, and lots of saving opportunities there with virtual machines. So I will just walk through on probably on this one as a good thing to go with. So again, I'm not going into the prices of different SKUs. I will show that one in a moment. Very important one thing is, again, what are the resources you're using and where are you putting those together? So, for example, the disks. We have this interesting discussion internally that what are the resources should be provisioned for production and non-production workloads. And for sure, it is easy to set the very same environment for a non-production environment as well. But do you really need a premium SSD disk, which is very expensive in a development environment which is you're running maybe once a day? Maybe not. Considering different tiers on the managed disk could actually help you to get better, driving your costs down, as one example. Then another thing which I have mentioned in a later of the slide, but as we are here, I think I will just go through with it, is the Azure Hybrid benefit. Azure Hybrid benefit is an offer from Microsoft, and if you have on-prem licenses, and that is something that you have to verify, obviously, internally. But this can drive the cost significantly. And basically, using on-prem licenses in Azure can drive your licensing costs down on Azure as well. And now I think Microsoft supports also Red Hat licenses and SAP HANA as well. It is worth to check those as well. And last but not least, mentioning here, and I will drive into a bit more on reservations and what they are and how it looked. Basically, you can also consider checking the prices here on how much it would cost you if you're doing actually reservations. For the initial discussion on how much is your cost, I would, however, recommend not to consider these. Why? Because as you're just developing the application, you might not know actually that how long is your application life cycle is. Is it just for 6 months or 3-5 years? That is something you might not know in the beginning. However, these are the things which can be considered for an established application as you move forward and considering reservations as well. But I'll get to the reservations piece a bit later. And pretty much these are the things which are coming in my mind for as a solution here. You can add more things into the calculator, and then you can see actually what is the final cost of these environments. So you can see how much would be your monthly cost. And if you defining your storage accounts, I have a multiple of those. You should be able to see actually what is your total estimated cost, and you can save it, you can export it, and you can at least get an understanding on the initial TCO of your application on Azure. So that's one thing. The other thing where starting on Azure, usually people having some on-prem environment, and Microsoft has a solution called Azure Migrate, which then can scan your on-prem environment and find you the best solutions in cloud. They recently introduced even a containerization option within that one, if I remember right. But by default, it is migrating VMs to VMs, and it also gives you actually an idea how much would it cost to run in Azure. And that's where it comes into understanding this one. Then I called out the kind of cost management. There is a nice blog I added into the deck later on, the Microsoft blog on cost management. Microsoft is, I would say, increased their investment in the whole cost management space in the last year, and it seems that they still continue doing that. And at least on a monthly basis, there are new features coming into Azure Cost Management. And I will talk through some of the features which have been recently announced. They are, I will be honest, really good ones. And if you are only on the Azure space, you might be just good to go with the Azure provided toolings and capabilities, to be honest, to start with. Hence, I strongly recommend to tap on this blog if you are on the Azure page. You can get up-to-date information on, for example, saving opportunities, new options on reservations, updates on the advisor. I'll get to that as well in a moment. And last but not least is there is a third. I mean, it is recommended still to tap into something outside of Microsoft. At least I would recommend that one. If you are, for example, in the virtual machine space, I found a fairly good tool, which is called the Azure VNet. Just a second, I will pull this one up. The Azure price.net, which is a fairly good tool to give you a comparison on the VM prices and gives you an understanding where might be cheaper actually to run virtual machines. If it pops up there, just give me a moment. And there are other, I mean, there are a number of other tools as well out there. This is one of them. And I will be honest, in case somebody's asking me on opportunities on VMs where they could be cheaper, or if there are regions which are cheaper, which virtual machines matching to what. This is, I think, a fairly good tool. Obviously, other tools out there as well, but I can strongly recommend to have a look if you having a very heavy IaaS-based solution, and maybe it doesn't matter for you in which region you're running it. Then this can be a good start to putting it as part of the discussion of the design, that where actually you're going to host your infrastructure on Azure. And as mentioned in the beginning, so the first step is, and the first recommended step, and again, getting mature with these things is not something that you can it's not something that you do as a one-step show for all of this, but starting with the inform phase is a very important thing. And as I mentioned in the beginning, a key element of the FinOps is accountability. So actually the costs are mapped to those people who are actually creating those consumption and those who are consuming those resources. So they're responsible for the cost. And for that, across all the clouds, not just Azure, is tagging. Tagging, and having the right tagging strategy is very important. I'm not saying it's a solution for everything. There are resources which doesn't support tagging, so you might always see some shared resources, shared costs, or some services which can be challenging to find the actual consumers. One good example could be, for example, ExpressRoute. Who is using those data transfers can be challenging to track that, which application and how much data they used, and mapping those costs back. That can be a very laborious work. So understanding how the cost is structured within the organization is important, but that's responsibility of the FinOps team. It's not necessarily responsibility of a developer or an engineer. However, understanding why this is important is a key. Obviously, tagging can be used for a lot of things. Besides making sure that the costs are mapped to the right things, parties, if you think on it, it is key for automation as well. So we'll talk about later on operating these things, and tagging is a key element there as well, to make sure that you're automating the right things. You are taking in scope resources which should be taken in scope. So that's about tagging, but I mean, we can talk about hours tagging. Some people actually having, should I say, third thoughts. Is it tagging the right way to do it? And definitely there are, as I mentioned, there could be challenges. So again, overdoing tagging could be a challenge, and well, a challenge can be a problem as well if you overthink tagging as well, or changing tagging too often. But this is a very important topic which should be discussed within the organization and settled, to find the right tagging and the right tagging strategy as you move forward, and then implement those taggings and govern those taggings. Or finding another way to actually manage your metadata. Okay, but that's about that one. So the next piece is getting visibility. And in that space, I will be honest, we have been relying quite long, and even still today, I'm relying quite regularly on the cost management portal in Azure. And Microsoft provides quite a bit of quite regular updates in there. There are always some new preview features. I'll just show mine, which I have there for now. So this is how it looks like. It is my MSDN subscription. Hopefully you can see the sharing. And it is basically under cost and management billing. And this is one of my subscription, which I'm using for some demo things. And this is how it looks by default. There are lots of different elements here. I will get that one in the moment. But one thing is to start there here, and I can recommend that one to everyone, is go into the try preview and basically say you can try all these different things. So for example, you can, with that one, you can set it cost analysis at home. With streamline menu, this looks a bit different. There are lots of features, and especially if you used on day-to-day basis the preview portal, you can see a lot of good things in there from Microsoft, what they are having developed under the hood, and the new features which are coming into cost management as well. Obviously, some of them are previews, so you have to take some of these features with a pinch of salt and provide feedback to Microsoft if there are problems you find. So hopefully, after all the kind of logins here and to the sign in, I can show how actually this one looks, because there are a bunch of really nice new features which are coming down now to Azure. So for example, seeing now resource level cost, which was one of the asks from the guys. But so this is how it looks by default, seeing the cost, and this is now on a subscription level. You can see actually even here in the preview portal, you can see resource group level and resource level cost as well. And you can even see now, oh, this is a new one, actually reservations in the preview as well. You can see the cost in different breakdowns. And I can just show back for this year just to have a bit more of a data and giving a bit nicer view on a monthly base, and for example, grouping by meter category. So just to find out, I provisioned some virtual machines earlier, just to understand how my cost looks like. Actually, I think I even had some app service, and as you can see, yes, I had somewhere or not, but you can already see actually how the costs are breaking down between virtual machines, storage, some network costs are in there, and also security center. I turned that one on my subscription as well. Costs obviously are not that high, but this was my January cost, which was still like less than 14 euro. I was not using this subscription lately that much. But it is a way to start. Now, one challenge is that this is good if you are having high-level subscription level access. And again, this is where you can start. If you are owning the environment or you're responsible for it, that's great. But I will be honest, even at Maersk, we are not providing this level of access to all the engineers because with the airbag responsibilities, that can be challenging to provide it, especially not giving out owner level responsibilities. You can go with billing reader, but that again might be an overarching view to some. So I'll give an idea on that, what you can do. But at least this can be a start here. So what you can do here, and I'll get to the preview, sorry, to the cost analysis preview here, which I think now it's breaking down on the resource group level, which I have seen now. Yeah. So this one is a new one. So you can see actually per resource group, and then actually the resource group level costs as well. And you can see under that the costs of the individual resources. This is in the preview as a new feature, and I will be honest, it's a really nice one. The next one, cost alerts. So in case somebody would like to get an alert on the costs generated in Azure, this doesn't block anything, but you can set up a certain you define a budget, and based on that, you can receive an alert. So because you don't want to spend more than, I don't know, 100 euro per month, then you can set this up and you are receiving an email. But this one doesn't do anything by default. So it just sends out an email. It doesn't shut down the resource. It doesn't do anything. Just remember that one. This is just an alert. And budgeting, in that sense, if you want, you can set up a budget, again, as a threshold communication. But maybe this is not something for engineers, to be honest, to drive that one. This is more like somebody who owns the subscription or a product, something that they could consider as an alerting mechanism coming out from Azure. Last and not least, problem is here that, I will be honest, I don't have much in this resort, so probably we won't see anything here in the Azure Advisor recommendations. But this is a good way to start, and I'll because we're switching to the next bit in a moment. It is a nice way to get some insights on what things you can actually right size or shut down because they are not utilized at all. I'll get that to a moment. Let me. What else is here? There are invoices, payment methods, whatnot. So again, those are less of importance for an engineer, but the cost analysis and preview, if you already established in Azure to understand that one, how your costs look like is the way to go. Okay, so what I mentioned here as well. Yeah. Microsoft provides lots of other solutions on FinOps, or I'm not saying FinOps, on cloud financial management, different ways to actually manage and surface your information. So one of them is Azure Cost Management in Power BI Desktop. You can link that one. However, this one requires a premium license of Power BI, if I recall right. So that can be a challenge if you cannot get that one from within the organization. You can basically get the very same information which you have seen in the portal, but you can then play with that one and visualize differently with Power BI. You can merge that one with other information. For example, if you have a CMDB in a spreadsheet or something, then you can map some of these business data information with that one. And then there is the Azure Cost Management app as well. That is, I think, requiring also some licenses from Microsoft. It is a Power BI app, which I can really briefly show just because one feature I really liked in there. So this is with the demo data, but this is how it looks. And the part which I wanted to kind of call out, because this is a bit of challenge to get out Azure by default, is this one, the Azure Hybrid Benefit Usage, Windows Hybrid Benefit Usage. So it can give you this kind of a view on how much VMs you have actually with AHub enabled. As we mentioned, that this is basically using your on-prem licenses. You don't have to purchase the licenses in Azure. And you can use this for reporting in case it's necessary. But yep, that's a nice feature, kind of custom feature of this Power BI application. Okay, so all these nice, but I guess you guys on especially developers might ask, okay, what is in these in me? And for me, I would say besides cost analysis, probably Power BI Desktop and Cost Management app doesn't make too much relevance for you. However, the reporting APIs, so Microsoft obviously API first, trying to drive Azure as an API first implementation, and there are APIs behind all this information and all the cost management information, all the reservation and whatnot. And those are, I would say, something to use for. There are lots of different APIs. The APIs can be very different based on the agreement model you have with Microsoft. So that is something to understand, but those can be used to build an internal capability, automation capability to surface relevant information. That is something we also use for certain elements, pulling down, for example, reservation information, recommendations, because the available solution at that point in the portal wasn't enough. So as always, Microsoft first releases new features in the APIs, and that's true for cost management as well. So keeping that one in mind, if you want to have the latest information or you want to build some automation around, I'll get to, for example, reservations later on. For example, reservation purchases, you have to use the different APIs, REST APIs. I put here reporting APIs, but pretty much the REST APIs, and build automation around that one. The next one is which I think I couldn't show on the portal. There are the exports. So the cost management portal obviously supports that you can download the data and funge with that one, but also and that is nice for finance people. But if you want to tap in that data and use it for something, and maybe it's a challenge to use the APIs for certain reason, there are this function available from Microsoft, which is called exports. You can continuously and automatically get the reports, the cost reports, to a storage account, and you can basically pick that one and use it elsewhere, build your own solutions on top of it, own internal reporting solutions on top of it, for example, as an option to be used here. So that's why I called that one out. One thing which is fairly unique actually on the Azure in managing and visualizing the costs and informing costs is AWS connector. So I will be honest, we haven't used this. I don't have much experience on this element, and it's probably due to the this one is probably due to the Cloudin acquisition, which Microsoft did a couple of years back. But it's good that actually they kept this, because I think the only public cloud provider today which is supporting other importing other data from other cloud providers is actually Azure. So you can pull in your AWS costs into Azure, and if you're using at least common tagging and whatnot, then you have a one interface where you can see all your cloud costs, and it can be very important from showing back the costs, or even charging back the cost, as can be important. I showed already briefly the budgeting. It's not really an engineering important for engineering, but you can set the alerts for yourself as well if you want. And you can get alerts on based on your consumption if you're reaching a certain threshold. It is an interesting solution. I will be honest, we haven't used it for alerting mechanisms, because we're using a certain other solution for that one. But it can be used for automation if you want to reaching a certain threshold. For example, you want to shut down a dev environment or something like that. You subscribe for these alerts, and then you can build some automation on this as well to save cost. Cost allocation preview. It is a new feature. It is a preview, and as I mentioned, in case there are shared costs which cannot be mapped to anything, you can define the portions to where that cost should be mapped back to which account. And last but not least is I've seen now in different companies, actually Maersk had a fairly similar solution until the recent years, that based on Azure Data Factory, SQL and Analytics Service, it is doable to build an internal cost monitoring solution, and you can fetch that one actually with your internal data. And then you can surface the relevant cost to the internal teams, so that they can see what is relevant, what is consumed by their application, and you're not also oversharing because you're not sharing the whole application. That it can be built, the access management can be built into the analytics service fairly nicely, and then Power BI can be used as a representation layer. There was a showcase on this one recently on one of the FinOps community calls by one other company, but as I mentioned, we did something similar a couple of years back at Maersk as well. So if you are solely based on Azure, it could be a good solution, and I wouldn't be surprised if, this could be extended also to other cloud providers as well, kind of building your own representation or information of your cloud consumption. Now, after all this, that way you can find all your cost details and whatnot. And I already bored probably a couple of you guys with that one. And sorry for that. We are getting into the action, into actually the things which can be important for engineers. And the first one to call out there, which Azure provides, and actually we used it also in a certain extent, is Azure Advisor. Because Azure itself is having the hypervisor. It collects a lot of information on the consumption in the cloud environment. Hence, it can tell if, for example, the virtual machine CPU is not utilized, or, for example, in past services, it can even collect more information like memory utilization of web apps and whatnot. And based on that, Azure Advisor is surfacing information on that you should size down a virtual machine or shut it down completely because it's not used in the last X days. And you can even define actually these based on what Azure Advisor should come up with. So it is a good way to start, at least on a low level, if you already have an Azure estate and you think that it's not optimized, to go in and just check Azure Advisor, what it recommends you out of the box, and fiddle with that one and see how much you can save. It recommends a lot of, at least what we have seen, that Microsoft was recommending a hell of a lot of reservations. Obviously, it means a commercial commitment towards Microsoft. So with taking that with a pinch of salt, those recommendations, we found them kind of valid. I'm not saying that those are not valid, but just to understand that piece. But just looking into right sizing, it is still a good start in there. With Azure Advisor. And you can actually automate Azure Advisor as well. For example, you can pull Azure Advisor information through APIs or through graphs. So even the graph query is supporting through Azure Advisor. You can query the state and see that actually if there are additional savings available in the environment. Reservations is a tricky piece, and we have been a lot of discussions, at least with within our organization, around this one. But we followed basically the recommendation, which is coming from the FinOps book, I would say, and the FinOps community, centralizing reservations. Why? Because an engineer might not know the life cycle of that application, or might not have the information of how long, making a long-term commercial commitment. He might not have all that information. So centralizing this into one team, which is recommended by the FinOps community, as I mentioned, into a FinOps team or a similar, it is recommended. And so far we have been managing basically reservations within the FinOps team and driving savings through that one. In Azure now, Azure provides lots of ways to do reservations, or lots of services can be covered under reservations. I will be honest, I'm really looking forward that they're looking into developing a similar solution, which AWS has these days, the saving plans. So hopefully this will be evolved into the next stage as well, because reservations, if you're trying to cover a lot and you're trying to cover your whole estate, it can be a quite laborious work. And you might need dedicated resources to manage the reservation so that you are not generating actually waste, and reservations are utilized and you are actually finding your spot in there. But it is a good way to save costs for sure. Spot VMs. Spot VMs are again a good architecture decision, something to consider during either during already operations or at the design of a certain solution, because a spot VM can be used fairly easy in an environment which are not bound to any time. When I'm meaning that the execution is not limited to, it has to be executed in a certain time frame. So for example, in the reporting, then spot VMs can be really good for those, because as we all know, the spot VMs can be taken away, I think in now maybe 30 seconds or something like that. but they can be really good to extend your cluster. And when they are taken away, for example, AKS clusters are now supporting spot VMs as well, Databricks as well. So kind of extending the cluster and using the extra computing capacity, but saving money because spot VMs are cheaper. It is a kind of should be considered as part of any clustering discussion these days. But even for single solutions, honestly, as I mentioned, so some reporting capability, for example, they could run on spot VMs fairly easy. And one thing which we this is something we got from a good recommendation from Microsoft. So I definitely call out this one when we had some engagements with those guys, is the B series VMs, which are fairly cheap by itself. Because if you're not running them, they basically collecting credits, and then when you're using them, then they use those credits. Obviously, this is not good for continuous workload, but it can be a great option when there are certain time slots when a machine is used. I got a good example from those guys when they were saying, for example, print servers could be a good example for these. Going with B series, usually they do nothing, and then when somebody's printing, then they start up and do the printing, and then they go back, and then they collect again the credits. And in lower environments, also using B series is something could be considered as well. I already mentioned the hybrid benefit and AHub, and again, this is something to be understand in the organization. Is there a hybrid benefit agreement with Microsoft? And if those can be used, these can be applied to SQL, Windows, and I think Red Hat, as I mentioned before, at least. It can be a good option to save on the cloud bill as well. However, reporting can be challenging on how much it's used, especially outside of VMs. To be honest, we found it challenging. There are some solutions for that, but again, pretty much that's it on the hybrid benefits and how you are governing that one in the organization. Something to consider, and I'll get to that one in the run stage a bit later. But if you think on it, that how you make sure that actually, if you have Azure hybrid benefit, then how all the new resources are actually deployed as a hybrid benefit or with hybrid benefits, so that you are actually using these savings, is a very important consideration as it moves forward. And last but not least, I called in here snoozing or scheduling, which is something we have seen. There are lots of solutions from Microsoft on this as well, like the automation engine, and in dev environments also it is by default, I think, offering that you can shut down the individual machines. So this can be set on a VM level in Azure, that it is shut down at a certain point in the end of the day, and then you can also build some startup on the next day. This can be challenging in complex environments and in a scale. So that is something that you might have to consider some additional development in-house to actually enable this feature, especially if there are certain applications which maybe don't really, there is a lot of custom scripting and whatnot which is done on the application side. This can be a challenging task, but I would call out here that the least of customization obviously is preferred in case of starting and shutting down, because that's how you can easily make those, in case of scaling, for example, those VMs and not having a static environment. So in case of a static environment, snoozing and scheduling could be also challenging as well. But snoozing and scheduling, especially in non-production environments, it is something to definitely consider as move forward. But yeah, even in production environments which are not used 24/7 or not used on a weekend, that is recommended. And I'm just checking back. That was a question from Vukasin. So, do you have any recommendations on how to track the cost of migrated resources versus the newly created resources in Azure that are not included in the original cost estimation? Is tagging a solution? I would say yes, tagging is definitely one solution. The other thing is, and kind of like I called out tagging there, but understanding or segregating your workloads in Azure is important. Subscriptions these days doesn't cost anything. They didn't cost anything even before, but there were some technical limitations a couple of years back. But these days there are no technical limitations on subscriptions. So Microsoft and you can spin up as many subscriptions as you want, using subscriptions as a kind of a block box. So for example, having your migrated one app in one subscription and another app in another subscription could be one way to do. And then tagging is definitely the other one. But you can have multiple layers of this. So at Maersk, to be honest, we are using tagging, we are using resource groups, we are using subscriptions, and all the mix of all this. So it can go either way. And being flexible in this, but understanding what you're mapping to what is important, and kind of trying to stick to that one. Was there anything else which I missed?
Yes, there are more questions. There is another one again, but the CAF.
How to use tools such as calculator. Yeah, it does not mention FinOps as you're describing it. You are absolutely right, and I will be honest. While well, maybe this is Sherry, you can take back to Microsoft. So Microsoft is not yet kind of, I think, a supportive member of the FinOps community. So I see recently GCP, which joined to it as a public cloud provider. Honestly, AWS is not there either, but that is something that maybe Microsoft could consider as a move forward. So I know that a bunch of Microsoft folks have been also, been part of the FinOps discussions, but not as a kind of supportive member. That is definitely something I think Microsoft could consider on a way forward. So yeah, I think that could be a reason that why you don't see FinOps as called out in the CAF as of today. Also, I think CAF was settled. I remember discussing with Microsoft 2-3 years ago. FinOps even was much smaller that day. So I will be honest, in 1 year, I think probably they kind of like doubled or tripled the amount of people who joined to the community. So it is kind of, it's a 4-5-year-old community as such. So fairly new in that sense. So I wouldn't be surprised that it's not part of the CAF as of today. It's not part of AWS CAF either. So to be honest, so yeah.
There is one more as well. Is about how important is Azure governance for FinOps?
Well, very good question. My next slide. So I would say if you ask me, the most important part is it, and this is where we are going into the operational piece. So you now managed to collect all these nice information. You should right-size things. You should kind of how your costs look like. But then getting it into action, and instead of people individually going into, okay, I would like to right-size this one virtual machine or whatnot, which is, to be honest, it's for everybody. Or like making sure that there is all the tags are compliant. This is where governance comes in, and governance is one, and that's why at Maersk I'm actually part of the governance team. So, and I think it's kind of a good place to be part of the Cloud Center of Excellence, and then the governance team as such is the right place to be, because these are coming together. So governance is finance, and governance and FinOps has definitely a close relation. Calling out a few things here. So starting from top down, simple things on governance, things which you can do as governing your spend. So depending obviously on what type of agreement you have with Microsoft. So I can talk from an EA level, and also from kind of my own subscription. You can block these things like marketplace purchases and reservation purchases centrally. As I mentioned, we centralized reservation purchase intentionally. We don't allow anyone else outside this very small certain set of people to purchase reservations. Hence, on an EA level, reservation purchase is not allowed by subscription owners even. They cannot do reservation purchases. It can be only done by the FinOps team. Same thing can be considered for marketplace purchases, because there could be a lot of extra cost or hidden cost. Don't get me wrong, but you can find actually that there are some hidden costs in the vendor, or it might be challenging to map those costs back, especially in a shared subscription. If somebody's going with some marketplace purchases, it can be a challenge to find where those costs actually belong to. So that's on really top level to start with, as one piece of governance to consider that and this is a manual exercise. It's something to make a decision and then just have it on that way. On the governance piece, it is good to start with always. I think Azure Resource Graph is a fantastic tool to start with, to understand actually the landscape before you actually implement any policy. So I call out here a couple of policies later on, as you can see, but it is good to understand the landscape. So for example, Azure policy, understanding, I go with the SKUs because maybe that's an easier one. So starting with what type of virtual machines we're allowing. So Microsoft, there's a huge amount of virtual machines types available, different SKUs, different families. And some of them are super expensive. Like if you think on it, M-series machines, those are specific for SAP workload, or N-series machines specific for different artificial intelligence and whatnot, with the graphic cards and all that kind of things. It is something that by the governance team should be discussed, that actually are those something which the organization really want to invest into. So if you don't run SAP workload as of today in Azure, and you're not planning to, then maybe right away you can go in and block M-series before somebody starts to provision M-series machines in there. As one thing. And Azure policy is a great thing, a great tool for that one. So, but again, starting first with Resource Graph, for example, just to get a hunch of where you are with cross-day subscriptions. Azure Resource Graph is really good in that. Obviously, you can use the REST APIs for that, but even PowerShell, whatnot, and even I think there is a UI interface for that. It's just understanding the landscape before jumping into the policies. Obviously, the Azure policy itself has a enforcement and just a kind of audit mode, I know, but it might take a longer time to get through all the resources instead of a quick resource graph query. So I found it really useful to go first with the resource graph, and then working with the governance engineer to kind of define those policies. So things obviously from financial point, again, these are, I wouldn't say that these has to be only driven by finance. It is a discussion. So from finance point, yeah, please spend less and less. But if there is a business need for M-series machines, because we are running SAP workload in Azure, I'm not there to block that one. That's not the point of financial governance. It's more about finding the balance between enabling the business and overspend, and avoiding waste, generating waste and overspend. And that's the same logic with allowed services. So if the organization is all in on AKS clusters, which most of the organizations do these days, but at least sometimes I would question that, because AKS is a great thing, but maybe it's not good for everything. And we have seen actually that it is the next level of hiding hiding under optimization and basically hiding safe within those clusters, because maybe not everything is reported in those, is something that something you should consider. That are you actually solving, as I mentioned earlier, are you solving actually a business need with AKS, or you just want to use AKS for your own sake? That is the discussion we should have. But as I mentioned, so allowed services, you can consider, are you using AI learning? Synapse is super expensive. It is a great service. We are using or we tried it also at Maersk as well, but it's super expensive. And if your organization is not really into data warehousing because they don't need it, maybe you should block to make sure that actually nobody starts provisioning a FinOps cluster as you move forward, or Databricks or whatnot. So that is definitely there with these kind of as a consideration. But this is something that you should verify with the architecture team, with the cloud architecture team, if you have one, or with CCOE, if you're part of CCOE, with the wider organization, that kind of getting a common understanding and avoid blocking people. Because I will be honest, if we have to generate an exception for a policy every day, then that's a wrong policy. You should define policies where you are rarely defining an exception, because that's what it is. It's an exception. It should be really occasional, well-defined policies. But finding the sweet spot there is always an interesting discussion. And well, there is allowed services. Obviously, that's something I touched. Same thing with the SKUs. So I think we went through on that. Workload placement and regions from financial point can be a discussion point. Again, West Europe can be very expensive. But if you have to keep your data in West Europe, I mean, finance shouldn't block you to do that one, or you need to build a resiliency as part of the service. Again, we shouldn't block that one, but considerations like defining at least, I think now, and Sherry maybe correct me, but probably we have 50-something regions now in Azure. If you are not a global company, maybe you don't need to make all those regions available. So again, focusing it down. And why I'm saying that with regions especially, but I'll drive back to with the workload placement and with the SKUs as well, is actually from the financial point, these are supporting two things. So one thing is that obviously you can agree with Microsoft as well on better pricing and better commercials. You have the opportunity to agree at least. For example, through reservations. If you can tailor it down to certain families, it makes your life easier to drive the reservations. If you're using all the families available from Microsoft, it is super hard to do reservations on all of them, because then there will be always a fraction of small reservations here and there, and you have to continuously move from one reservation, exchange it to another one. Would be fairly challenging to kind of then surface actually the savings, and also your days will be around exchanging back and forth reservations, except if you're building an automation on that. So, and same thing with the regions. At the moment, reservations is you can scope it on, you have to scope it on a certain family and on a region. If you are on all over the places, again, it is a challenge to do reservations on those. So at least from an optimization point, or kind of it is important from that element. It can be important from other areas as well, like I mentioned, from security reasons, or from GDPR or whatnot, where you're storing the data. So again, we are from financial point, we are feeding into that one as a policy, but it's not necessarily the only driver behind such a policy, like where you are allowed to place resources. And then last, but not last, I have one more there, which is tagging compliance and enforcement as a policy. So I mean, we discussed already that how important is to have at least some level of tagging, if that's the way how you are managing your infrastructure. Then having a compliance behind that one to make sure that actually certain settings are in place. So for example, a good example is you having a different subscription for development and different subscription for production. Still, it would be good to have, for example, a tagging which is calling out a resource as a dev resource, because you're driving automation across all the accounts. But you just want to enforce a certain activity, for example, snoozing only on dev resources. So tagging itself is a very important part of, or can be very important part of that one. It can be across organization, or just down on for example, a product team or application level as well. And last but not least, I just call this one out here. I will be honest, we are tipping on this at the moment. We are trying this one out as well. So we're just experimenting with managing policies at scale, and policy as code. I put in into the not show notes, but into the notes of the deck the link to Microsoft. So basically, with GitHub Actions and whatnot, pulling your policies from GitHub, and also the changes, and managing through that one instead of manually managing them through the portal is something which is obviously, depending on the size of the organization, is recommended. And I think at least these were the decks which I was thinking on to drive through quickly. Any questions which I maybe missed in there?
I believe we answered all the questions. So for the audience out there, if you still have questions, please highlight it there. We are over time, but I guess it was a really insightful session, Tamas. Thank you very much for clarifying that. And meanwhile, I also highlighted 2 of our Microsoft Learn modules in the comment, that they are also going to cover the same some of the topics, cost optimization, and I found the other one as well about the Azure Advisor as well. Maybe I can quickly just share my screen to have the closing. So I already highlighted the URL to have your Azure Heroes badges. So scan this QR code to get your learner badger. And the other link out there, please use it if you have collected so far 15 Azure Heroes badges. You can fill out that form, and then you will get some swag box. Maybe it also even has this one in it. So I'm just saying. So it's a mystery swag box. Let us know if you have these 15 Azure Heroes badges. And if you don't know if you haven't heard of Azure Heroes program, is a reward and recognition program from Microsoft for the developer community. I normally actually describe it as the token of appreciation from us to you for learning and building on top of our technology. You can always learn more about the program by going through this to this URL. We have other badges apart from the learner badges. You can nominate yourself or a community friend for some of the other badges out there. And we want to improve, and especially right now that we are going on like a summer break, with Osmus, we are planning our upcoming sessions, which is going to start from August. But let us know what you want to learn. What are the sessions that they were missing here? We also, in this feedback form, we have a section. If you have any feedback for Tamas, we will also make sure that Tamas hear the feedback that you posted there. You can always use our hashtag as well to talk to us on social media. So that help us to improve, because we are at the end, we are your show. And our upcoming session, of course, we don't have any sessions so far, but if you are into the IoT and cybersecurity, and there is this community meetup tomorrow, you can join. I put the URL here, but if you are also on the Azure User Group Copenhagen, there is a link to that session as well. There are going to be 2 really awesome speakers. I really recommend you to join these sessions as well. With that, I would say we really enjoy you all have a really nice summer break. You too, Thomas. I hope you also get 2 days. Thank you very much for the insightful session. The video is going to be on the YouTube, so if you join us late, you can always go and then review the session as well. We also have a session commentary for that. Thank you for you as well for the information, and also we promised a swag box for the person who asked the best question. I guess for you, Thomas, is going to be very easy to choose.
Yeah, in that sense, it was easy. Yes, I guess it goes to Vukasin, right? If I pronounce your name well, hopefully.
Yes,
so you threw in a couple of good questions, definitely.
Yeah, that is true. You won the previous swag box as well. You know how to contact us. So contact us. You're going to get one more swag box from us. Thank you all, and see you all later. Bye bye.
Thanks, Cheryl. Cheers.